world was different when I was a kid. America is a country. Anybody could go anywhere they damn well pleased.
It would be a misnomer to even remotely downplay how much of a colossal shitfest 2020 has been. We live in a world of vast technological innovation, brimming with large populations in tightly packed cities and bustling business centres. But then, in a rather startling turn of events, we were forced out of the streets and into our homes. The once cramped streets of cities like New York were empty for probably the first real time anyone could remember. In one of the most confounding turning points in recent human history, in order to help ourselves, we had to help everyone around us and remain, in some cases, alone. And that's really what the term self-isolation brings about, doesn't it? Ideas and thoughts of dread, of possibly being forced to go it alone, keeping you in like a bird in a cage, day in, day out, just hoping to smell the early morning air once more. It's not fun. It's an experience that, for many, gave way to some of the toughest times in their lives. It begs for some form of reprieve, whether it be in connecting with families and friends, finding a new hobby, or finally catching up on your extremely lengthy Netflix watch list. But what if I told you there was one game that not only emulated many of the emotions brought up during this tumultuous year, but that the game had already come out? Ahead of its time is a phrase thrown around quite a lot, and often for good reason. George Orwell's 1984 famously criticised the inherent lack of freedom and humanity provided within not only totalitarian governments, but also explored the possibilities of how democratic governments can enforce their powers in similar manners. On the video game front, 1999's Deus Ex and 2001's Metal Gear Solid 2 foregrounded the moral quandaries surrounding government oversight, fake news, and social disparities across the globe. But today, I offer Hideo Kojima's Death Stranding as another title in the field. Not just because its setting of the United Cities of America is quite reflective of much of this year, but also for its messages, philosophy, and deeply ingrained themes that resonate at each and every level of the experience. Death Stranding is the perfect game for 2020.
Once there was an explosion, a bang which gave rise to life as we know it. And then came the next explosion. An explosion that will be our last.
Connections are at the very core of Death Stranding as a whole. One could say it is what permeates all of this game's existence. Its basic plot is about connecting a fragmented society in the wake of catastrophe. Its characters and their journeys all revolve around connecting in some form, either with others, their past, their present, or their future. Its symbols and motifs all involve some form of connection, whether it be bridges, ropes, their version of the internet known as a chiral network, hands, and even the physical act of touching. Almost every single milestone you reach in its gameplay, whether it be major or minor, connects you further into either the game's world or its multitude of characters, as well as your invisible online comrades. Hell, even the world outside of the game itself has been about forming connections with other people. Kojima's dedication to ludonarrative harmony throughout Death Stranding is by no means subtle, but it pays off brilliantly in almost every facet. The first of which is the game's story, a 40-hour-long voyage through a shattered post-apocalyptic America as you try to unite it once more. And how do you achieve this? Through delivering packages to citizens self-isolating in their underground bunkers, of course! Main character Sam Porter Bridges suffers from aphanphosmphobia, a very obtuse term for his inherent fear of connection, both physical and emotional. Sam's intrinsic morals and characterization, bolstered by his phobia, offers a striking parallel to 2020 as a whole. When you first meet him, he's a broken man, clearly a product of a bygone era in which humanity thrived, only to now live alone, hesitant to bring about connections with anyone else. He reflects in a lot of ways the emotion shared by many today: bitterness, hopelessness, and a whole lot of cynicism, and rightfully so. Without delving into plot spoilers too much, the game covers topics ranging from a very poignant commentary on modern America and its politics, as well as the effects, both positive and negative, of social media, all the way to life after death and what it really means to be human. Death Stranding comments on all of this and yet still manages to deliver an uplifting message. Choose love over hate, empathy over retribution, embrace one another instead of pushing each other away. The messages are by no means unique or groundbreaking, but the manner in which they are conveyed offers such weight to the audience to the point where its emotional resonance is mere unparalleled. None of its effects would be possible though without its gameplay.
We had highways, airplanes. Hell, you could even visit other countries.
The early hours of Death Stranding are pollinated by an overwhelming sense of loneliness and confusion. You'd often go travelling for tens of minutes without actually speaking to or hearing from another soul. Even when you do, it's only through holograms or codec calls. If you do manage to see another soul wandering outside, however, they're more often foe than friend. It's an isolating journey, and if it weren't for the occasional vignette with the game's multifaceted cast, you'd likely feel deprived of any form of connection. There are times throughout where you feel less like an essential worker and more like Sisyphus, pushing the stone against the unwavering tide of challenges the world throws at you. It's lucky then that the reward is less the new pieces of equipment you earn, but the interactions you have with the numerous survivors placed across the large map. I quickly found myself keenly invested in many of the characters' individual stories and wanted to help them the best I could, even if it meant taking the road less travelled in order to get there. Whether it be due to many of them resembling famous pop culture personalities such as Jordan Vogt Roberts or Conan O'Brien, or their quirky personality traits, I soon became quite attached to them. One particular character I grew invested in was the Elder, and witnessing his arc, which heavily echoes Sam's own, was just one of the many fulfilling experiences I've had with this game. With every passing delivery, I saw a jaded old soul who rejected any form of connection transform into someone eventually welcoming Sam, and by extension myself, with open arms. But it's not just the characters within the world that Death Stranding allows you to build bridges with, and in this case, it's meant both figuratively and literally.
Hard to imagine it now. Fucked us beyond all recognition.
There was a recent delivery I participated in from Mountain Knot City, in which I had to travel high up into the snowy mountains and back down again to retrieve some lost equipment. I made sure to keep myself fairly lightweight, only bringing the essentials like a ladder, some rope, and a replacement pair of boots. The exosuit I was wearing had a pretty large amount of battery, so I figured I could make the trip a little issue. I began my 500-meter journey, only to find the trek taking much longer than I ever expected. 30 minutes later, I was almost on my last legs, my boots nearly worn out, and my battery almost depleted. I was just about to lose hope and retreat until suddenly, hope appeared right before my eyes. A generator! I ran over to it, ignoring the cost it would take to my stamina. Elements be damned, I thought, I'm still in this! It was then, right as I saw my battery replenish itself, that I was reminded that I wasn't alone, that there were other people out there. Moments like these are what Death Stranding was made for, and more than make up for the long and arduous trudges up a mountain or along a rocky cliffside. The idea that your hard work eventually pays off further down the line brings a sense of fulfillment that I've never felt in a game before. The world is ever-changing and rarely remains stagnant. The roads you travel in Hour 3 will be drastically different from those you travel in Hour 30. Single stretches of road soon become highways, spanning hundreds of meters in length. Zipline placements eventually span out into entire networks, allowing you to traverse large expanses of rocky terrain in seconds. Checking in every few weeks or so on how the highway is progressing, tending to any needed repairs or additions, is a metagame in itself. It's an example of how Death Stranding's social strand mechanic completely revolutionized how I viewed this open world as a whole. For much of the story's duration, I focused purely on what would immediately benefit me, with the added thought of what I lay behind being beneficial to someone who chose a similar route. But once I was in the postgame, and returned after a few weeks to find an entirely drivable highway before me, I changed my tune. Now, I would sometimes dedicate entire deliveries to either upgrading existing structures or filling out the rest of a highway. I'd sometimes just place down ziplines or generators even when I didn't need them. As it all continued on, I realized the extent of just how much bigger the world was than me. I didn't need to see any other real players alongside me because sometimes, even something as small as a ladder sitting adjacent across a stream gave me comfort in the fact that I wasn't alone. Each and every remnant of a player I came across represented just how entwined we all were, and in a day and age where we feel more divided than ever, it helped in ways I could never think imaginable.
So how about it? Can we count on you?
Many people often find comfort in any type of game. Some go to experiences such as Minecraft, Stardew Valley, or Animal Crossing. Others may go to a Call of Duty, Doom, or maybe even a Rainbow Six Siege. But for me, I think I can say I find comfort in Death Stranding, foreboding title aside. What once started as a 40-hour struggle against a ceaseless world with an uplifting message soon transformed into a little hobby of its own. Every now and again, when I didn't feel like shooting my ways through endless hordes or swinging around New York City, I'd insert the disc and just sit back for an hour or two, hiking along a relatively quiet stretch of road and basking in the beautiful visuals of its world. I found comfort in that simple act, as it gave me a reminder of the good we can do as a people. While not everyone may find the same enjoyment and experience as me, it is a game about walking and delivering packages after all, I couldn't recommend Death Stranding enough. It's long, for sure, and strange, and involves around about an hour's worth of extracurricular reading to fully grasp its lore, and is quite a time investment, but upon initial completion, the feeling is incredible. Not only does it tell a beautiful story, touching upon some surprisingly novel ideas for a video game, but it also involves the player directly into its themes, allowing you to truly grasp what Hideo Kojima and his team were striving for. While games like The Last of Us Part 2 offered a much more cynical and nihilistic representation of humanity, Death Stranding offers something very few games do nowadays: hope.